Hey guys, Mana here bringing you another episode of More Dots. This is episode 5 and I got a lot of cool questions to answer, so let's get right to it. Alright, first question from Blue Monkey Being. My question is, with the new patch notes, the percentage gain from Dark Intent for the targeted friendly has been reduced from 3% to 1%. Glad that they didn't directly decrease the buff that Warlocks get, but I find it frustrating that the one party buff we receive only has a stacked max of 3%. Do you think there will be more party buffs coming, or is it necessary? Alright, so before I answer, I should say that Dark Intent isn't really a party buff. It's more like a single target buff, like Focus Magic, except that Dark Intent is awesome because it's a Warlock spell. Alright, so there's two main parts to this answer. The first part is about Warlock party buffs. Well, the thing is that Warlocks actually can bring a lot to a group. The Imp, it gives Blood Pact, that's the stamina buff. The Fell Hunter gives Fell Intelligence, that's increased mana and MP5. If you're a Demonology Warlock, then you bring 10% spell power. Each spec is intended to have its own buff. In addition to this, Warlocks also bring Curse of the Elements. Warlocks bring Health Stones, and they bring Soul Stones too. And actually, Blizzard has already said that Soul Stones will eventually be battle resist, which is pretty awesome. Alright, so the second part of the answer deals with the nerf to Dark Intent. I'm not 100% sure why it's being nerfed, but I feel like I got a pretty good theory. Alright, so Dark Intent. Here's the thing. No other class can bring anything like Dark Intent, alright? Warlocks are the only ones that have Dark Intent. What I mean, and this is pretty obvious. I mean, shamans are the only ones that have Bloodlust. But mages have Time Warp, and Time Warp literally is Bloodlust. So if you don't have a shaman, you can still have a mage. But if you don't have a warlock, well, you're screwed because you don't have Dark Intent. So that's the thing. That's the main issue here. If you don't have a warlock, your shadow priests and your fire mages or whatever aren't going to get that huge benefit out of Dark Intent. So Blizzard is trying to make it so that not having a warlock isn't as big a deal as it is now. If you don't have a warlock now, your shadow priest is going to be sad as hell. But in 4.1, when this change hits, I mean, they're still going to be sad as hell, but it's not going to be as big a deal as it is now. Alright, next question isn't really a question, it's more like me responding to some feedback. In my last episode of More Dots, I talked about how I didn't like some of the buffs that Warlocks were getting, specifically the 5% buff to Affliction's Shadow Mastery. A lot of people basically told me that this buff is intended for PvP. Well, here's my problem with that. The change may very well be intended for PvP. I don't know. Like I've said before, I'm not a big PvPer, but anybody can see that it obviously has PvE consequences. Simulations currently put Affliction far ahead of Destruction and Demonology, so I really don't see the need to overbuff Affliction here. Now, there's currently two main buffs. There's the Shadow Mastery 5% buff, and then there's the Fell Hunter's Shadow Bite. Now, the thing about the Fell Hunter is that it currently hits about as hard as a brand new sock. So to me, this buff feels necessary, because the Fell Hunter is intended to be Affliction's demon of choice. But on the other hand, Shadow Mastery, that change seems like it puts Affliction even further ahead when it didn't really need that at all. Alright, so I know a lot of people are going to be telling me that it's necessary for PvP, and who knows, it may be true. I certainly don't know, but a lot of people seem to think it's true, so it may be true. But if Warlocks do really need help in PvP, Blizzard needs to find a way to make it so that it doesn't have a negative impact on PvE balance. For instance, the Unstable Affliction damage when dispelled buff is a clear PvP change, and it has no effect on PvE. I feel like Blizzard should be focusing on these kinds of changes if Warlocks do need help in PvP, because I don't see the need to further buff Affliction or Warlocks in general in PvE. I think we're fine in PvE. Alright, so next question from someone who chose to remain anonymous. Hi Mana, I currently main spec Demonology and I enjoy using it for every fight. But recently my raid leader has asked me to start using Destruction and only use Demonology for AoE fights instead. I tried explaining that Demonology is a good raiding spec, but he threatened to bench me if I didn't switch. How do I explain that Demonology is a viable option? Alright, so the first thing to note is, when is he telling you this? If he tells you to switch specs during a raid, I would strongly suggest that you do not try explaining to him the facts during the actual raid. Raid leaders, they have a lot to handle, and a lot of them just don't want to deal with someone that doesn't listen. So if you find yourself being told to switch specs during a raid, or maybe just for a specific boss, do it. After this, the best thing you can do is to perform well and to show him that you're a skilled player that understands his class. Alright, so after the raid, after all that is done, you can either go to one of your officers and explain what's going on, or you can try talking to your raid leader specifically. It's important that you explain clearly because you need to show that you know what you're talking about. And don't be afraid, because if you explained everything well, then it should all go smoothly. You know, a good raid leader wants to get the best from his raiders. So there's no reason for him to turn you down, you know, unless he's a jerk. But in that case, you might need to find a new guild. Alright, so this next question isn't so much of a question as it's me trying to relieve the pressure that my inbox has because I get this way too much. This blank is my DPS rotation. This blank is my armory. How can I improve my DPS? Alright, so look, if you want to improve your DPS, I have guides for each spec on my channel if you want to get better at a specific spec. I have a guide on maximizing your damage if you already understand your spec. Besides this, there really isn't anything else I can tell you. I mean, practice. That really is all there is to it. Just keep practicing and keep getting better and keep analyzing your mistakes and keep improving upon them. Alright, next question from Deuce Bigalock. Should Blizzard buff IF Kilrog? Sure, I guess. Yeah, I don't have anything to say about that. I don't know. Yeah, so that's gonna end this episode, guys. If you guys have any Warlock related questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or to send me a private message. And as always, if you guys enjoyed what you saw, feel free to like and to subscribe. Later, guys.